I cut contact with my family for 10 years due to my stepdad's extreme rules. After his passing, I discovered a shocking truth. Now my mom wants to reconnect, but I'm not sure I can trust her. I, 32F, have been estranged from my family for the past decade due to my stepfather's, 58M, controlling behavior. To understand how I got here, I need to start from the beginning. I grew up in a small town in Ohio with my mom, 54F. My biological dad left when I was just a baby, so it was always just the two of us. Mom worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, and despite the financial struggles, we were happy. I have fond memories of us cooking dinner together, her teaching me to ride a bike, and our weekly movie nights. Things changed when I turned 15. Mom met John at the grocery store where she worked. They hit it off immediately and started dating. I was happy for her at first. Mom deserved to find love, and John seemed nice enough. He'd bring her flowers, take us out to dinner, and even help me with my algebra homework. 3 months into their whirlwind romance, they got married. It was a small ceremony at the local courthouse, with just me and John's brother as witnesses. Mom was beaming, and I thought maybe we'd finally have that picture-perfect family I'd always dreamed of. But the honeymoon phase didn't last long. Almost immediately after moving in, John began to show his true colors. He was obsessed with cleanliness and order to an extreme degree. At first, it was little things. He'd ask me to take my shoes off before entering the house or to use a coaster for my drinks. Reasonable requests, I thought. But it quickly escalated. John would go into a rage if anything was out of place in the house. This meant that as a teenager, I couldn't have friends over, couldn't decorate my room how I wanted, and had to follow strict rules about where I could eat or drink. I remember the first time I saw John truly lose it. I was doing homework at the kitchen table and accidentally knocked over my glass of water. Before I could even grab a towel to clean it up, John was there, his face red with anger. He yelled at me for what felt like hours, calling me careless and irresponsible. Mom just stood in the corner, silent. From that day on, John's rules became even stricter. I wasn't allowed to eat anywhere except the kitchen table. I had to take my shoes off before entering the house and wash my hands immediately. If I touched anything in the living room, I had to wipe it down with disinfectant. It was like living in a museum where I couldn't touch anything. As I got older, the rules extended beyond the house. John would inspect my car whenever I came home, making sure it was spotless. If there was even a bit of dust on the dashboard, he'd make me clean the entire car before I could come inside. I once spent 3 hours cleaning my car in the driveway during a rainstorm because John found a forgotten fast food wrapper under the seat. The worst part was that my mom never stood up for me. She'd just say, "That's how John is. You need to respect his rules." It was clear that she valued her relationship with John more than her relationship with me. I felt betrayed and alone. High school became my escape. I joined every club I could, took on a part-time job, anything to stay away from home. I made friends with a girl named Sarah, whose family became a safe haven for me. Her parents would let me stay over frequently, no questions asked. They could see I was struggling, even if I never told them the full extent of what was happening at home. When it came time for college, I applied to schools as far away as possible. I ended up at a university in California, a whole country away from John's rules. Those 4 years were a revelation. I could decorate my dorm room however I wanted. I could eat on my bed without fear of punishment. I could live like a normal person. But every time I came home for breaks, it was like stepping back in time. John's rules hadn't changed. If anything, they'd gotten worse. He'd implemented a no shoes in the house policy that extended to all visitors. My mom had to keep a basket of slippers by the door for anyone who came over. The final straw came when I was 22. I had just graduated college and came home for a visit. I brought my boyfriend at the time, Mike, 23M, with me. Mike knew a little about my family situation, but I don't think anything could have prepared him for the reality. John immediately started in on Mike, criticizing his clothes for being wrinkled and making him take off his shoes and socks so John could inspect his feet for cleanliness. I was mortified. Mike was uncomfortable but tried to be polite. Later that night, I overheard John telling my mom that Mike wasn't good enough for me because he clearly didn't know how to take care of himself properly. I was furious. Mike was a kind, intelligent guy who treated me well. Who was John to judge him based on arbitrary cleanliness standards? I confronted John about it, and we had a huge argument. I told him he had no right to judge my boyfriend or me. John said that as long as I lived under his roof, I had to follow his rules and respect his opinions. I pointed out that I didn't live there anymore, I was just visiting. He said that didn't matter, his house, his rules. My mom, as usual, sided with John. She told me I was being disrespectful and ungrateful. That was the moment I realized I couldn't do this anymore. I packed my bags, apologized to Mike for the awful visit, and left. For the next 10 years, I had minimal contact with my family. I'd send a card on birthdays and Christmas, but that was it. I built a life for myself in California. I made great friends who became my chosen family. I focused on my career, working my way up in a tech company. I even found love again. I met David, 34M, at a work conference 5 years ago. We bonded over our shared love of hiking and bad sci-fi movies. He was patient and understanding when I explained my family situation. We got married 2 years ago in a beautiful ceremony on the beach. My mom and John weren't invited. Last month, I received a call from my mom. She was crying and told me that John had passed away suddenly from a heart attack. She begged me to come home for the funeral, saying she needed my support. I was conflicted. On one hand, I hadn't forgiven John or my mom for how they treated me. The thought of going back to that house filled me with anxiety. On the other hand, I felt guilty about potentially abandoning my mom when she was grieving. After talking it over with David, I decided to go to the funeral. The funeral was awkward, to say the least. Many relatives I hadn't seen in years were there, asking why I'd been absent for so long. I gave vague answers, not wanting to start drama at a funeral. I saw my childhood friend Sarah, who gave me a long hug and whispered that she was proud of me for coming. After the service, my mom asked me to stay for a few days to help her sort through John's things. Against my better judgment, I agreed. David had to return home for work, so I was on my own. The first day of cleaning was tense. My mom kept making comments about how John would have wanted things organized a certain way. I bit my tongue, not wanting to speak ill of the dead. We worked mostly in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. On the second day, as we were going through John's office, my mom found a letter addressed to me. She handed it to me with shaking hands, saying John must have written it sometime before he died. I'm not sure what to do. Part of me wants to read it, hoping for some kind of explanation or apology for his behavior. Another part of me wants to burn it without reading it, not wanting to give John any more power over my emotions. I'm afraid that whatever is in that letter might reopen old wounds that I've worked hard to heal. I don't know if I should read the letter. I don't know if I should try to rebuild a relationship with my mom now that John is gone. I feel lost and confused, torn between the family I was born into and the life I've built for myself. Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1: It's been a week since my last post, and a lot has happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their advice and support. Your words gave me the courage to face this situation head-on. After much deliberation, I decided to read the letter from John. I figured that whatever was in it, I was strong enough to handle it now. So, with David on speakerphone for moral support, I opened the letter. To say I was shocked by its contents would be an understatement. The letter was dated just a month before John's death, and it was an apology. John wrote that he had recently been diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, and had started therapy. He said that looking back, he realized how his untreated condition had negatively impacted everyone around him, especially me. John explained that his obsession with cleanliness and order wasn't just a preference, but a debilitating compulsion that he couldn't control. He acknowledged that his behavior was harmful and unfair, particularly to a young person trying to grow and find their place in the world. The letter went on to express regret for driving me away and for not seeking help sooner. John wrote that he had wanted to reach out to me for years but didn't know how to begin to make amends. He ended the letter by saying he hoped that one day we could talk, and that regardless of whether I could forgive him, he was proud of the person I had become. I was overwhelmed with emotions after reading the letter. Anger at the years of torment, sadness for the relationship I never had with my stepfather, relief that he had finally recognized his behavior was wrong, and frustration that this revelation came too late for us to actually talk about it. I shared the contents of the letter with my mom. She broke down crying, revealing that she had known about John's diagnosis but he had sworn her to secrecy, wanting to tell me himself when he felt ready. She apologized for not standing up for me more when I was younger, saying she was afraid of losing John if she pushed back against his rules. This led to a long, emotionally charged conversation about our past. I told her about the anxiety and depression I'd struggled with in college, the result of years of walking on eggshells at home. I shared how her silence had felt like a betrayal, how I had felt alone and unsupported during some of the most crucial years of my life. My mom listened, really listened, for what felt like the first time in years. She shared her own struggles, her fear of being alone after my biological father left, her insecurities that led her to cling to John even when she knew his behavior was wrong. It didn't excuse her actions, but it helped me understand her a little better. While I appreciate her apology, I told her it doesn't erase years of choosing her husband over her daughter. I explained that I'm glad John sought help before he died, but it doesn't change the fact that his behavior, and her enabling of it, caused me significant trauma. My mom asked if we could try to rebuild our relationship now that John is gone. I told her I'm not sure. On one hand, I do miss having a mother in my life. I miss the closeness we had when I was young, before John came into the picture. On the other hand, I'm not sure I can trust her to put me first if push comes to shove. We agreed to take things slow. I'm going to head home tomorrow, but we're going to try having weekly phone calls to start. I've also asked her to see a therapist to work through her own issues, which she agreed to do. Before I left, my mom gave me a box of my old things she had kept. Inside, I found my high school yearbook, some childhood photos, and a mix CD I made when I was 16. It was a bittersweet reminder of the person I used to be, and how much I've changed. On my last night in town, I met up with my old friend Sarah for coffee. We talked for hours, catching up on each other's lives. She told me how worried she had been about me in high school, how she had wanted to say something but didn't know how. I assured her that her friendship had been a lifeline during those difficult years. As I packed my bags to leave, I took one last look around my childhood home. The strict rules and oppressive atmosphere were gone, but so was the warmth and love I remembered from my early years. I hope that with time and effort, some of that warmth can be rekindled between my mom and me. I'm still processing everything, and I know it's going to take time. But for the first time in years, I feel like there might be a path forward with my mom. It's not going to be easy, and I'm keeping my guard up, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Thank you all again for your support. I'll update again if anything significant happens. Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and I wanted to share some developments in my situation. The weekly phone calls with my mom have been challenging. While she's been making an effort, it's clear that she's struggling to understand the depth of hurt her actions, or rather, inactions, caused me over the years. During our third call, she made a comment about how we should let bygones be bygones now that John is gone. I had to firmly remind her that it's not that simple, and that her role in enabling John's behavior was just as hurtful as his actions themselves. This led to a heated discussion where I finally laid out all the ways her choices had affected me. I told her about the anxiety I still feel in overly clean spaces, how I struggled with relationships because I never learned what healthy boundaries looked like, and how I've always felt like I came second in her life. I shared a memory from when I was 17. It was prom night, and I had spent weeks saving up to buy a beautiful dress. When I came downstairs, excited to show my mom, she just looked worried and asked if I was planning to eat or drink anything while wearing it. She made me put on an old shirt over my dress for photos, just in case. I ended up feeling so self-conscious that I barely enjoyed the dance. My mom was quiet for a long time after that. When she finally spoke, she said she had no idea how much damage had been done. She apologized again, this time more sincerely, and asked what she could do to make things right. I told her that a good start would be to respect my boundaries now. This means not pushing for more contact than I'm comfortable with, not making excuses for past behavior, and most importantly, listening to me when I express my feelings instead of getting defensive. On a positive note, my mom has started seeing a therapist as I suggested. She's only had a few sessions, but she said it's already helping her understand her own behavior better. She realized that she has a pattern of prioritizing her romantic relationships over other aspects of her life, including her 72 relationship with me. In other news, I've been doing some reflection of my own. Reading John's letter and confronting my mom about the past has brought up a lot of old feelings. David suggested that I might benefit from talking to someone professionally as well. At first, I was resistant to the idea, but after some thought, I've decided to give it a try. I've also been in touch with my aunt, my mom's sister, who I was close to when I was younger. She reached out after hearing about John's passing, and I ended up telling her everything. She was horrified by what I'd been through and angry at my mom for allowing it to happen. It was validating to have someone from my family acknowledge how messed up the situation was. My aunt has offered to be a buffer between my mom and me if needed, which I really appreciate. She's also been sharing some family history that I wasn't aware of. Apparently, my grandmother was also very controlling, and my mom learned early on to appease rather than confront. It doesn't excuse her behavior, but it helps me understand her a bit better. As for me, I'm taking things one day at a time. Some days are easier than others. I'm trying to focus on the positive relationships in my life, my husband, my friends, my aunt, while setting healthy boundaries with my mom. I'll update again if there are any major changes. Thank you all for your continued support and advice. Update 3. It's been 3 months since my last update, and I wanted to share where things stand now. The biggest development is that I've started seeing a therapist, Dr. Anderson. It's been eye-opening, to say the least. She's helping me work through my childhood experiences and how they've shaped my adult behaviors and relationships. One thing Dr. Anderson pointed out is that I have a tendency to be a perfectionist, especially when it comes to cleanliness. It's not nearly as extreme as John's behavior was, but it's there. I never realized it before, but it's likely a coping mechanism I developed to avoid conflict. It's something I'm working on now. As for my relationship with my mom, we've had some ups and downs. We're still doing weekly calls, and they've gotten a bit easier. Mom's been sticking to her therapy sessions, which I'm proud of her for doing. Last month, she invited me to visit for a weekend. I was hesitant but decided to go, with David accompanying me for support. It was strange being back in that house without John's presence looming over everything. During the visit, Mom showed me some changes she'd made to the house. She'd redecorated the living room, making it more colorful and comfortable. She said she wanted it to be a welcoming space for family gatherings. It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot to me. We had a long talk that weekend about our past and our hopes for the future. Mom admitted that she's realizing how much she lost by prioritizing her relationship with John over everything else. She's trying to reconnect with old friends and rebuild her relationship with her sister, my aunt, as well. One particularly poignant moment came when Mom brought out some old photo albums. There were pictures of me as a kid, before John came into our lives. I had forgotten how happy and carefree I used to be. It was a stark reminder of what was lost, but also motivation to try and reclaim some of that joy in my life now. As for me, I'm slowly learning to let my guard down a bit. It's not easy, and there are still moments when I feel the urge to retreat behind my walls. But I'm trying to be more open, both with my mom and in my other relationships. David has been incredibly supportive through all of this. He's been my rock, offering a listening ear when I need to vent and gentle encouragement when I'm feeling unsure. I'm grateful every day for his presence in my life. I've also been spending more time with my aunt. She's become a sort of mother figure to me, offering the unconditional support I didn't get from my mom when I was younger. She's been helping me reconnect with other family members who I'd lost touch with over the years. Looking ahead, I know there's still a long road to travel in healing my relationship with my mom. We're both committed to putting in the work, but we're also realistic about the fact that things will never be perfect. And that's okay. For now, I'm focusing on my own healing and growth. I'm learning to set healthy boundaries, to express my needs clearly, and to not let fear of conflict control my actions. It's a process, and I'm taking it one day at a time. Thank you all for following my journey and for your support along the way. Your advice and encouragement have been invaluable. I may not update again unless something major happens, but know that I'm doing okay and working towards a healthier, happier future.